Hello and welcome to a Thursday Live right here on the early line on SportsGrid and all across the SportsGrid network. That includes sportsgrid.com/watch, where you can find your favorite destination and consume everything all across the grid. I am Ben Stevens. He is Donnie Rightside. We are together here for the next 3 hours up until 11 a.m. Eastern time on this Thursday. Officially a week and a half out from Super Bowl Sunday in Las Vegas. The countdown gets down to 10. Tomorrow will be single digits from Super Bowl 58 between the Chiefs and the Niners. The line is moving ever so slightly. Donnie and I will put on our odds makers glasses to guess where it might end up by the time we get to Super Bowl Sunday in just about 10 days. A ton of action around the association last night. 10 games on the hardwood. A huge night in college basketball. History once more for Iowa's Caitlin Clark. All of that and more over these 3 hours up until 11 a.m. Eastern.
It's officially basketball season out there, people. So we did have a big card yesterday. Some interesting doings on both the NBA side and also the college basketball side. And you're right. We're getting closer and closer to Las Vegas and Super Bowl 58. And maybe the tide is turning on your boy DRS on where we should actually be placing our money on Super Bowl 58. So we got a great show ready to go.
Ooh, that's a little bit of a tease that even excites his co-host. I hope it excites you out there as well. Donnie, we start in the National Football League with some big news. 2 coaching vacancies entering yesterday were still available in Seattle and in Washington. And after Detroit's Ben Johnson tells everybody around the league he is remaining in the Motor City as the offensive coordinator of the Lions, the next hottest coaching commodity, Baltimore's defensive coordinator, Mike Macdonald. We welcome in that Sports Grid radio audience here quickly to hour number 1 of 3, live on the early line on Sports Grid, Sirius XM, channel 159, all of our radio terrestrial affiliates now in the fold. So Mike Macdonald became that biggest prize in the coaching carousel, and he finds his way to the Pacific Northwest. The Ravens defensive coordinator over the past 2 seasons, now the newest head coach for the Seattle Seahawks.
Great singer, even better defensive coordinator, Mr. Michael Macdonald out there going from the East Coast to the West Coast. It's a solid hire, but honestly, Ben, I really thought we'd probably be going offensive out there. But hey, what a fool believes, baby. Defensive coordinators rule, you know?
Yep. Maybe so. Mike Macdonald and some lyrics from Michael Macdonald. You have a Mike Macdonald, a Mike McDaniel, a Mike McCarthy, all now head coaches in the National Football League. Macdonald, at the tender age of 36 years old, now becomes the youngest head coach around the NFL. So Seattle goes from the oldest head coach and the best-looking 72-year-old you will ever see with Pete Carroll, now to Mike Macdonald. Plenty more reaction for what this means in the NFC West and for the Seattle Seahawks later on in this show. It was a night of returns and reunions around the NBA. Kevin Durant and the Phoenix Suns back in Brooklyn for the first time. But more importantly, Damian Lillard, after spending the first decade of his NBA career back in the Rose City to take on the Portland Trail Blazers. His Milwaukee Bucks, in the second game with Doc Rivers as the head coach on the sidelines, were an 11-point favorite on the road. The Blazers said, "Welcome back, Dame, but you're not coming away with a victory." Portland pulls off the upset, winning outright as an 11-point home underdog, 119-116.
Welcome to the Doc Rivers experience here for the Bucks. It'll take some time to acclimate, but that's not a good start, specifically losing in Portland. And also Dame Lillard, 9 of 23 from the field. You couldn't get one more layup in there. Over 26.5 loses because it needed 1.5 more points, which is 1 more bucket. At the end of the game, we're happy with Brook Lopez shooting 3-point shots and not Damian Lillard at this point. But oh, well, there's the way it goes. Homecoming there for Dame, who, by the way, real quick on this one, saw the post-game press conference. Always love when an athlete does this. Like, man, I can't even believe, how draining it was. Everybody just kept asking me, how's it feel to be back in Portland? No kidding, Dame, right? Congratulations. You played bad and your team lost. What a homecoming.
I don't know about you, Donnie, but I'm officially on the hater wagon for the Milwaukee Bucks. Damian Lillard, 3 of 13 last night from 3. I needed 4 for some plus money, and he only hit 3. And then I bet the Bucks lay at 11 because it was Doc's second game after a disappointing effort in Denver. No way they were going to start 0-2 after making the changes at the head coaching spot and bringing in the doctor. I'm off Milwaukee, off them in a big way. So not a great return from the win-loss column for Damian Lillard or even the efficiency last night. Much better for Kevin Durant in Brooklyn inside the Barclays Center. A game-high 33 points for the easy money sniper as he leads his Phoenix team to a 16-point margin. 136-120 over Brooklyn. Phoenix covers as a short 3-point favorite on the road inside the Barclays Center.
Nets were in it right up until the half, and then a big third quarter there by the Suns, 42-26 to put that basketball game away. And yes, Kevin Durant did have a very good game yesterday and also cashed in a FanDuel odds boost in this basketball game with Kevin Durant needing to score 20 points. Went over that, and also Booker just to hit 2 or more three-point shots. He actually hit those 2 in the first quarter right away. So a nice night all around. Big win by the Suns, improving to 28-20 now in the season.
The Suns have now won 9 of their last 11 games as well, something to keep an eye on in the Western Conference. The Miami Heat, though, well, they snapped that losing streak yesterday, entering losers 7 of their last games. They win 115-106 at home over the Sacramento Kings. Miami closed as a short 2-point home favorite. They cover as that short 2-point home favorite against Sacramento.
Mr. Triple-Double. No, we're not talking about Russ Westbrook. That is Domantas Sabonis. 19, 17, and 13 at the game wasn't enough. And I actually like the Kings in this spot because I wasn't trusting the Miami Heat. This is the game I thought they would give a couple games ago, but now finally got a win back. 25-23 for the Heat. Only way to go but up here for them.
Keegan Murray, 7 threes for Sacramento, 33 points, still not enough. Jimmy Butler, 31 to pace all scorers for Miami. Now to college basketball. What a night it was inside Mackey Arena in West Lafayette, the number 2 team in the country. Purdue survives in overtime against Northwestern. 105-96 the final. The Cats do cover as a 13.5-point underdog, but it ended in OT with one of the all-time ejections you will ever see. Northwestern's head coach, Chris Collins, is tossed on his way out of the arena. He shakes Matt Painter's hand. He daps up Zach Edey, and he pumps up the crowd as he exits into the tunnel. Again, an all-time ejection.
And by the way, on this one, if you're upset about, look at all the free throws, Ben, that was shot by one side, which is Purdue. Did you know Purdue is the best team at getting to the free throw line in the Big Ten? And Northwestern, on the other hand, is the best team at fouling to make sure you get to the line. Look, things played out that way. Purdue won going away.
46 free throw attempts for the Boilermakers, only 8 for Northwestern, but that's not really what Chris Collins was even all that irked by. Overtime as well, this time in the SEC inside Rupp Arena, in the Florida Gators pull off a stunner, 94-91. The upset over Kentucky. The Gators win outright as a 5.5-point dog.
They had a massive total for this basketball game, and they took it down with 185 points there. A fun game in the SEC, and that's going to be a good one to watch play all the way out, man. Top-level teams, mid-level teams knocking each other out.
We'll talk about Caitlin Clark's history later on in the show as well. Now into college basketball next.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
Right now, we saw a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division favorite.
I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
I can tell you, like, Las Vegas is heavy San Francisco territory. All right, there are a ton of Niner fans, man, in Las Vegas and in Nevada, and specifically Reno. Reno's close, obviously, right? So, like, Reno's numbers will be a little bit different, but the total of 47.5. I get it.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
I kind of thought that Mike would maybe go in a different direction, or at least listen to some people with some different ideas.
If you were going to retain Mike Tomlin as coach, and I believe with both feet that you should, that you shouldn't let him really anywhere near this hire. That he had proof over the years that this was not an area of comfort or expertise for him.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Purdue on the road in a very difficult place to win in Piscataway, New Jersey. Not in Jersey Mike's Arena, but in the RAC. It was tight.
You still have to win these games. Like, you can talk about even equate it to the NBA. Like OKC just rolling into Detroit, going, yeah, this is going to be an easy victory, and not coming away with the W because you're not focused here. Good move there for the Purdue Boilermakers. You can take a look at Zach Edey.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
One that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets and when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Live right here on this Thursday on the early line on SportsGrid. It's Ben, it's Donnie, and whenever Caitlin Clark is on the basketball floor, you can expect some sort of history. Last night, Clark and her Iowa Hawkeyes on the road against Northwestern, a big victory in Evanston, 110-74. They even covered as 35.5-point favorites. Caitlin Clark led the way for Iowa, 35 points. So now in her college basketball career, that is a number that tracks at 3,424, the second most points ever scored in a women's college basketball game in D1 history, now only trailing Kelsey Plum, who played her college ball at Washington, by 103 points to become the all-time leading scorer in women's college basketball. Caitlin Clark leads the country with over 32 points per game on average. She is on pace to get there by the middle of February, about 4 to 5 more games for the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Yeah, and by the way, the spotlight on women's basketball pretty hot right now, and the reason is we are tracking Caitlin Clark. She's a lot of fun to watch. South Carolina's a dynasty. We'll see if LSU can actually go back-to-back this year if they get hot and make it through the tournament once again. But the interesting part about it is, like, I never would have known, like, Kelsey Plum played at Washington and was the leading scorer in NCAA history, but I do know Caitlin Clark's been moving up those charts here, specifically last year and into this year. It's fun. Like, they're getting a little bit more of that pub time, but also providing the outcomes that we like, Ben, right? Because if you would have told me today, like, hey, Iowa won 55-54 and Clark had 22 points. Like, no, I was out there in a women's basketball game dropping 110 points on the road. It's a fun brand of basketball to watch, and I'm sure the ratings will substantiate once we even get to those conference tournaments and the women's March Madness tournament.
A historic brand of basketball, to say the least. The average road attendance from when Iowa is playing in a game away from Carver Hawkeye, the numbers are astronomical. Everybody wants to see Caitlin Clark. By the way, the all-time D1 college basketball record, man or woman, Pistol Pete Maravich, 3,667. Believing that Iowa makes at least a run and will have some games in the Big Ten tournament, of course, will be an NCAA tournament team, probably with at least 3 to 4 games come March Madness. Caitlin Clark has the all-time record very much in her sights as well. About 3 to 4 games needed on this current trajectory to become the all-time leading scorer in women's college basketball. She needs 104 more points to set the all-time record. Now we go back to the men's game. Number 1 team in the country the UConn Huskies in action last night at home in Stores against the Providence Friars. The Huskies were booked as a 13.5-point favorite against PC. They win by 9, 74-65. When we spoke yesterday, Donnie, the total was 139.5. It came all the way down to 136.5. Depending on when you got that number, either you stayed under by the hook or you went just barely over. But UConn continues. They have now won 9 straight games since dropping their Big East opener.
Yeah, and by the way, I like the points in this game with the Providence Friars, but this is where sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, Ben, when you see the final outcome. What did I like about the Providence Friars? They could get to the free throw line. They did. They actually shot 26 free throws, made 50% of those. Also, if you want to be an underdog and pull for an upset or stay close to a team that's much better than you, give me a team that likes to shoot the three-point shot. It's the Friars. 4 of 18 from three-point range, Ben, 22%, and still got the cover. Because you know what else helps? Caravan left a little bit of that game with an injury, and also Klingon only played 15 minutes because he got injured in this game. Sometimes some things go your way and say, you know what? I really like the underdog because here's what's supposed to play out. It didn't play out and still got the cover. You'll take it.
Got to monitor what happened with Donovan Klingon last night, a guy that has dealt with injuries throughout this season, only 15 minutes for Connecticut's star big man. Meanwhile, the freshman Stephon Castle leads the way for UConn, 20 points. Devin Carter on the other side for Providence, 20 points as well. The Friars have been booked as an underdog now 5 times in Big East play. They are a perfect 5-0 against the spread. An overtime thriller inside Mackey Arena in West Lafayette, Indiana. The number 2 team in the country, the Purdue Boilermakers, looking to get the revenge against Northwestern. The Big Ten opener for both of these clubs came back on the very first night of December in Evanston when Purdue was ranked number 1 in the country. Northwestern pulled off the outright upset in overtime at home. They were hoping to do the same last night. They come up just a little bit short. The Boilermakers survive 105-96. Northwestern does cover, though, as a 13.5-point underdog. Again, a fantastic game. We hope we will see this game for a third time for that rubber match between these two sides. And you'll look at the free throw disparity. And, of course, when you have a 7'4" big man in Zach Edey, the game will be officiated to certain ways that lead to questions. However, when Chris Collins got ejected right before overtime came to a close, he wasn't so mad about how they were calling fouls on Zach Edey, but Lance Jones, the transfer for Purdue, could have been called for an offensive foul in a key moment. He was not. It leads ultimately to Purdue surviving at the end, 105-96.
Yeah, it had one of those feels of like a Rick Pitino game, right? When he used to be with Louisville, hey, we're going to be up-tempo, we're going to press, and we're going to foul a lot. But you know what? We're not going to expect the refs to call all of these fouls because it would be ridiculous. Well, in this game, they did call all of those fouls, and for a good reason. As I pointed out, Purdue is the best in Big Ten play at getting to the free throw line. Now, shooting 46 free throws, that is a lot. But by the way, Ben, only making 63% of those as a team. If this was like the Sixers and Joel Embiid and was like, okay, they went 43 of 46, that might have been a wild outcome. But the fact they only made 29 of the 46 kept Northwestern in that basketball game. And by the way, looking at Northwestern, again, just looking at the box score, if you would have told me this before the game, hey, we're going to shoot 58% from the floor, 52% from three-point range, and 75% from the line, we should get another win against the Purdue Boilermakers, but that just wasn't the case. Why? Because Purdue countered with 58% from the floor and 48% from three-point range. Fun basketball game here in the Big Ten where both of these teams approaching the century mark. Good stuff all the way around, but yes, Northwestern got the cover, and that's probably the most important thing we'll talk about is today.
Again, I want to make sure everybody sees the Chris Collins ejection. Go to social media, look it up. It was all time. While the ball was in play, still with seconds remaining in OT, he storms out onto the playing surface to get in the face of the referee, Courtney Green. He gets tossed, and as he leaves, he pumps up the crowd. An all-time ejection. Northwestern's backcourt, Ty Berry, Boo Booey, combined for 50 points. Zach Edey, the reigning National Player of the Year, the soon-to-be second-time consecutively National Player of the Year, 30 points, 15 boards. He now has 13 games of 30 and 10 in his Purdue career. Nobody else in college basketball in the last 25 seasons has had more than 8. Huge night in the SEC. We start in Rupp Arena. Kentucky booked as a 5.5-point favorite, and like it was in Mackey in Rupp, we go to OT as well. But this time the road team pulls off the stunner and the upset. The Gators of Florida went outright as a 5.5-point dog, 94-91 in that extra session.
And Kevin Walsh had to be crying tears of joy as Walter Clayton Jr., former Iona Gale, leads the way with 23 points for the Florida Gators as they invade Rupp Arena. I'm not minding this. I still have my eye on those Kentucky Wildcats, and I'm pretty sure that once we get to March Madness, I'm going to have a flyer on them for a chance to win a national championship. So just keep those numbers as low as possible. Let these guys mature out here. Day-to-day operations in the SEC, it's hard to win those basketball games. I think they will be just fine come tournament time.
That's a bad idea, DRS. They don't play defense. 75th best in the country. A total of 170.5 that had 168 in regulation goes over in OT. 94-91. Alabama, best record in the SEC, makes it even better. 7-1 now in conference play. They hold off on the road yesterday, a Georgia Bulldogs team that was trying to make a comeback. 74-65. The Crimson Tide cover as a 6.5-point road favorite in Athens.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the team total. I'm not sure what the team total, Ben, for Alabama actually was, but they finished with 85. And let's just say, whatever way you would have bet that here, over or under, like 27 points at the break, just turn the TV off. There's no way I'm going to get my team totals. They hit the gas for 58 in the second half. Or if you were fading them and took the under on the road, feeling in good shape, man, that team can score.
We'll continue with the basketball recaps up next here on the Early Line.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev. Go run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
Right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division favorite.
I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
I can tell you, like, Las Vegas is heavy San Francisco territory. All right, there are a ton of Niner fans, man, in Las Vegas and in Nevada, and specifically Reno. Reno's close, obviously, right? So, like, Reno's numbers will be a little bit different, but the total of 47.5. I get it.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
I kind of thought that Mike would maybe go in a different direction, or at least listen to some people with some different ideas.
If you were going to retain Mike Tomlin as coach, and I believe with both feet that you should, that you shouldn't let him really anywhere near this hire. That he had proved over the years that this was not an area of comfort or expertise for him.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Purdue on the road in a very difficult place to win in Piscataway, New Jersey. Not in Jersey Mike's Arena, but in the RAC. And it was tight.
You still have to win these games. Like, you can talk about even equate it to the NBA. Like OKC just rolling into Detroit, going like, yeah, this is going to be an easy victory, and not coming away with the W because you're not focused here. Good move there for the Purdue Boilermakers. You can take a look at Zach Edey.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
One that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts, so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
A 10-game slate on a Wednesday evening around the association, a night of returns and reunions as well. We start in Portland, where Damian Lillard, after 10 years in the Rose City, back as a member of the Milwaukee Bucks. But it did not go the way of Milwaukee. So many things playing up into the atmosphere last night back in Portland for Dame. His return for the first time against the Trailblazers, game number 2, with Doc Rivers as the head coach of this Milwaukee organization, looking for their first win under Doc Rivers, booked as an 11-point road favorite. It should have been easy. It should have been a night of celebration. It should have been a night of coronation for Damian Lillard. It was not. 25 points under his points prop of 26.5. 3 of 13 from 3, and the Blazers pull off the outright upset, winning by 3, 119-116 as an 11-point home underdog.
Yeah, you always want to go back to the arena that you played over a decade in and be that conquering hero, coming back with a much better basketball team and giving a wave to the fans. What a great night it is. Dame scored 38 points. The Bucks won going away, and it was a great homecoming. Not necessarily the case here for Damian Lillard. Now, he didn't play a bad basketball game, Ben. He was just inefficient in that game, 9 of 23 from the floor, but he did chip in with 6 rebounds and 7 assists. That should have been good enough for the victory here. Because quite frankly, you take a look at Dame Lillard, had a +6 on the night. So did Giannis Antetokounmpo. And each one of the starting lineup here for the Milwaukee Bucks was a plus. And they still end up losing to a Portland Trailblazers team that had no business beating the Milwaukee Bucks here. Not a great start for the Doc Rivers era in Milwaukee, but I was surprised waking up to see that final score. Because even though the first thing I checked was the box score and how much Lillard scored, and I was like, oh no, I needed one more bucket to cash in that ticket. And then I checked the final score. I'm like, now hold on. You're telling me Dame Lillard went back, didn't play all that well, and the Bucks lost in that basketball game? Because what I was probably hoping this year, thinking I was going to see, was Giannis Antetokounmpo, 43 points, 11 rebounds, 7 assists, and away they went. That's a good win for Portland. Why? Because Portland was actually down 1 point with under a minute to go in that game and made the clutch buckets and great defensive plays in order to lift them to a victory. I'm still surprised, though, that Milwaukee, forget about even covering the spread, losing outright to the Trailblazers. I didn't see that coming.
There was a moment late in the game where Dame inbounded the ball to Giannis, who was immediately fouled, obviously, missed both of his attempts from the charity stripe, and Portland was able to hang on. The Blazers win outright as an 11-point home underdog. The other reunion last night, Kevin Durant back in Brooklyn against the Nets. That one went better for the returning star against his former team. 3-point number in favor of the Suns. They win big. KD leads all scorers with 33 points. Also had 8 dimes. A big victory for the Suns, who have now won 9 of their last 11 games with a win last night inside the Barclays Center.
Yeah, I got to lay off taking the Nets at home, getting the points. And maybe I could have used a little Ben Simmons action last night. But, of course, he played his one game for the season, and we might see him in another few weeks when he can play decent again. But that's a nice win for the Phoenix Suns, a 16-point win coming back into Brooklyn for Kevin Durant. He certainly put on a display much more efficient than we saw at Damian Lillard. 10 of 16 from the floor, 11 of 12 from the free throw line. Team leading 33 points in that game. Nurkic chipped in with a nice 28-point spot here. Bradley Beal played 37 minutes, only got to the 12 points. So when you have at least one guy in the big three stepping up on a night-to-night basis, you got a great shot at winning games. That's a big-time victory for the Phoenix Suns, not only winning that basketball game, but covering in style there.
And they have not been a great cover team this year. Now they have covered in their last 3 victories. The Suns, 8 games above 500, 28-20 straight up, a 7-1 price to win the NBA's Western Conference crown. I will say that is a very intriguing number to me, but still, Phoenix sits in the 6th spot in the Western Conference standings behind the Kings, the Nuggets, the Clippers, and the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are also a game behind the Minnesota Timberwolves. A huge game last night, though, in OKC for the second consecutive game for the Thunder at home, taking on a team atop the Western Conference. Earlier this week, it was the Minnesota Timberwolves. The T-Wolves go on the road. They win as a 2.5-point underdog outright. They take over the top spot by themselves in the Western Conference. Entering last night, OKC was 32-15, a half game behind the Denver Nuggets, who were 33-15. The Thunder ended up being booked as a 6.5-point home favorite because no Nikola Jokic last night for the Denver Nuggets, and OKC gets a big 5 5-point victory. The Nuggets only an underdog for the 6th time last night. They do cover, only losing by 5. But in terms of making marquee statements at the top of the Western Conference, the Thunder get a big one last night at home.
I thought the Thunder would win that game. And also, if you're watching the early line, thinking Jokic was still going to possibly play in that game, that number was 1-2 points in that range, got up to 6.5. So technically, you covered if you took the late number once Jokic came out for the Denver Nuggets. But the two things I expected last night, which is basically what I expect on a night-to-night basis from OKC. That was OKC to win that basketball game and Gilgeous-Alexander to drop over 30 points, which he did here.
Yeah.
That's a great win. We talked about it yesterday. The handicap overall, Jokic or no Jokic, and he ends up not playing. But you want to file these games away because when you get to a playoff scenario, you don't ever want to go in and be like, well, we played them 4 times during the year. We had a better record overall, but they beat us all 4 times. You got to get these wins that you can draw back to when you get to the playoffs. And hey, guys, we played this team before. We've beat this team before. I don't care if Jokic was on the court or not. It's just nice to get the victory against that team. I thought OKC would get the job done, and they did last night.
Denver has already played 49 games this year. They now technically have the 4th best winning percentage in the Western Conference, but there's a couple of game disparities throughout the Western Conference standings. The Timberwolves, the best record, 34-14, a full game up on the Oklahoma City Thunder. Minnesota, a big victory at home last night, 121-87 against the Luka Doncic-less Dallas Mavericks. So a big win for the T-Wolves behind Minnesota and OKC, slightly in front of Denver, the LA Clippers. So as we look at the Western Conference standings and correlate them to the Western Conference odds, the Nuggets, the favorites, plus 180. Or plus 175 now, plus 320 for the LA Clippers. And again, that's 7-1 number on Phoenix. But the two teams at the top that with the updated numbers, plus 950 for OKC, same exact price with plus 950 with Minnesota on the other side. That will be the thing that we monitor throughout the home stretch of this NBA season. What do the numbers look like? The odds outright to win the Western Conference for those teams on the up and up, Minnesota and Oklahoma City.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to play out, as we said, because, again, the regular season doesn't necessarily, that success equate into a playoff championship or a deep playoff run. You take a look at the Denver Nuggets as the favorites, technically 1.5 games back in the Western Conference, but been there, done that. If they show up to the playoffs and healthy, you're going to give them a legitimate chance to take it down. The other teams that are actually ahead of them in the standings, right? The Minnesota Timberwolves, really good regular season basketball team. How's that going to translate into the playoffs? A younger basketball team in the Oklahoma City Thunder. Very good regular season so far. How does that translate into the playoffs? And then the other teams we take a look at, such as the Phoenix Suns and also the Clippers, in that same boat. Not saying that they're not equals and they can both win a championship, but teams trying to blend together. James Harden, new to the crew. How's it going to play out? Will they be healthy in the playoffs? And that's the same thing with the Phoenix Suns, adding Bradley Beal here to the equation with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. So a lot of fun things to talk about in the Western Conference. We're just going to wait to see, once the playoffs gets here, who's actually for real. But from those numbers, we already know the Nuggets are for real. We're waiting to see how the other teams react, and also, once they get to the playoffs, how they turn out.
The Kings, a 23-1 price. Of course, Sacramento was the 3 seed in the Western Conference postseason a year ago. Sacramento on the road last night in South Beach against a streaking Heat team, but in a negative way. Miami entered riding a 7-game losing skid. That streak is now snapped. 9-point victory for Miami at home over Sacramento, 115-106. The Heat cover as a 2-point home favorite.
Yeah, Fox and Barnes didn't show up in this game here on the road for the Sacramento Kings. Barnes goes 4 of 13 from the floor, but 0 for 6 from three-point range. Fox, 4 for 16 from the floor, 1 for 8 from three-point range. Talked about it at the start of the show. 19, 17, and 13 from Sabonis. Just wasn't enough here, but finally, the Miami Heat get a victory and on their home court. Jimmy Butler shows up with 31 points. That's what you needed, and maybe they can sort of take that exhale, like, okay, we got that win. The streak is stopped. Let's put some wins together before the All-Star break, and let's get that good mojo back for the second half.
As we keep it moving around the association of Minneapolis, we go, the best team in the Western Conference. The Timberwolves were booked as a 13-point home favorite last night in the Twin Cities against the Dallas Mavericks. Why such a large number? No Luka Doncic for Dallas. No Kyrie Irving for the Mavericks either. So Minnesota covers as a 13-point home favorite, 121-87 over the Mavs. Again, the Timberwolves, the best record in the Western Conference, 34-14, and they have held serve on their home floor, 18-4 straight up now in the Twin Cities.
Yeah, the smart way to bet this game would have been taking the Dallas Mavericks in the first half as they're only down 4 points at the break. But when you don't have your superstars that you can rely on, the longer the game goes on, the other team tends to take over. And as we know, the Minnesota Timberwolves, maybe the best defensive basketball team in the NBA, won the third quarter by 9 points and the fourth quarter by 21 points, easily pulling away to cover that double-digit number. That's what you're supposed to do when you're a good basketball team. On your home court, the other team's injured, take care of them, and they did.
And Anthony Edwards only had 9 points, but Minnesota now 17-2 against the spread as the favored side. The number 1 overall pick from the 2022 NBA draft faced off against the number 1 overall pick from the 2023 NBA draft last night in San Antonio. Paolo Banchero led his Orlando Magic with 25 points and led his Orlando Magic to a 10-point road victory, 108-98 in San Antonio, despite 21 points on the other side for Victor Wembanyama. The Magic cover as a 5.5-point road favorite, DRS, in San Antonio. Orlando now 11-4 against the spread as a favorite. The Magic overall best cover team in the association. We play odds makers. We guess the line for Super Bowl LVIII next.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev. Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I don't
favorite.
care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
I can tell you, like, Las Vegas is heavy San Francisco territory. All right, there are a ton of Niner fans, man, in Las Vegas and in Nevada, and specifically Reno. Reno's close, obviously, right? So, like, Reno's numbers will be a little bit different, but the total of 47.5. I get it.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
I kind of thought that Mike would maybe go in a different direction, or at least listen to some people with some different ideas.
If you were going to retain Mike Tomlin as coach, and I believe with both feet that you shouldn't let him really anywhere near this hire. That he had proved over the years that this was not an area of comfort or expertise for him.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Purdue on the road in a very difficult place to win in Piscataway, New Jersey. Not in Jersey Mike's Arena, but in the rack. And it was tight.
You still have to win these games. Like, you talk about even equate it to the NBA. Like OKC just rolling into Detroit, going, yeah, this is going to be an easy victory, and not coming away with the W because you're not focused here. Good move there for the Purdue Boilermakers. You can take a look at Zach Edey.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
One that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
10 days away. The countdown continues for Super Bowl 58 and Super Bowl Sunday in Las Vegas. It's the Chiefs and the 49ers. So throughout this countdown, since the end of Conference Championship Sunday, and when we joined you here on Monday morning on the early line, we have been giving you the updates, small, couple of cents, incremental, on the money line throughout these past 3 days or so. But it's not so much the movement that has happened, but it's the prediction of where the movement will go as we get closer and closer and closer to Super Bowl Sunday. So let's start with the line right here, right now. Still a 1.5-point spread in favor of the 49ers. We have seen some sense on that money line with the market movement. It got as close to only an 8-cent difference between the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers. Minus 112 for San Francisco, minus 104 other side for Kansas City. Right now, Donnie, minus 130 for the Niners, plus 110 for the Chiefs. The over-under, 47.5. That has remained pretty steady. So before we dive into where the market might move, what are your thoughts on what the market is telling us at this point?
Market's telling us right now that we're still roughly a week and a half away from the Super Bowl, which means that public money doesn't really get knocked into shape a week ahead of time. That's going to start to flow in late next week. And I do agree where the line should be. I think the San Francisco 49ers are the better football team. Do I think they should be a 3-point favorite? Not necessarily, because then the betting public would say, no. You're going to give me a field goal, which means they probably got to lose by a touchdown for me to lose money on Patrick Mahomes. I'll just go that route. We're going to talk about where I think this line actually winds up. But for today, I think it makes some sense. You have that stronger opening number on on San Francisco, bet down to around that 1 range. Then some San Francisco 49ers money came back, and it makes some sense. But again, I preface this, that heavy avalanche of money, which means when the betting public finally realizes the Super Bowl is 3 or 4 days away, that comes in. And also, we talk about that whale money that flies into Las Vegas for the Super Bowl and hits the casino cage with $1 million wire on a certain route. That's going to change odds as well. So I agree where it stands now, but it'll get pretty fun towards the end of next week.
There's whale money with the big bettors getting into Las Vegas. There's wheel money as well. You avoid the wheels at all costs. So let's look at recent Super Bowls. Kansas City, for instance, in Super Bowl 54, the rematch against San Francisco, closed as a 1.5-point favorite, and the total was at 53. Of course, the Chiefs won 31-20. They covered the number as a short favorite. Total stayed barely under. Super Bowl 55. The Chiefs opened as a 3.5-point favorite, closed still laying a field goal. The Buccaneers were dominant, 31-9. Tampa won outright. Super Bowl 56 remained pretty consistent between the Rams and the Bengals. In fact, in the last decade of Super Bowls, Donnie, Super Bowl 56 is the only game that incorporated the spread, where the spread mattered. LA won by 3, 23-20 over Cincy. Of course, the Bengals ended up covering. In the other 9, the underdog has either won outright, that has happened 6 times now, or the favorite has covered the number. That includes last year's Super Bowl 57. KC opened as the favorite. By the time we got to Super Bowl Sunday in Glendale, Arizona, the Birds, the Philadelphia Eagles, a short 1.5-point favorite, and it furthered the idea of Mahomes as the underdog. Now 9-3 straight up in the 12 starts he has made in his career, dating back to 2018 as the underdog, 10-1-1 against the spread. And Donnie, I find it interesting when you use Super Bowl trends of recent history. Different teams than who we see here, even though it's a Super Bowl 54 rematch. These two teams are completely different in how they are orchestrated and constructed. And yet you can start to learn a few things by how Super Bowl Sundays of the past have played out. 6 underdogs outright in the last 10 Super Bowl games. And when those 6 underdogs have won outright, 5 of those 6 totals pushed to the over. A couple of the recent trends as it pertains to this Super Bowl Sunday in Super Bowl 58.
Yeah, and again, there's those trends that you do want to look at because the line movement is pretty interesting to try to watch it play out. When I was growing up as a kid, basically through the late 80s and early 90s, when we weren't getting any -1.5s, -2.5s. There were some games where the San Francisco 49ers would show up as 17-point favorites over the Chargers. I mean, we had some of those wild numbers where it was basically the coronation. If you won the NFC Championship game, they should have just handed you the Super Bowl at the same time because it was a blowout route runaway once that NFC team got to the Super Bowl. That's no longer the case, and that's fantastic because that's why it's fun to have here. We're not talking about college football lines, 17.5-point number, 21.5-point number. We're talking about you pick the winner of the football game. You're going to probably pick the winner on the spread line as well. So some of those trends coming into it, it doesn't affect me as a handicapper. Say, hey, do you see that recent trend where the underdogs win all the time? Because I always take the Super Bowl and any other game as a separate entity as how it plays out. So the influence for me where I go, you know what? I can't take the Niners. The underdog always wins the Super Bowl. That's certainly not a way to handicap that would be profitable long term.
There was a 5-year span from the Super Bowl that was played in 1994 to the Super Bowl that was played in 1998, where the number was always double digits and always in favor of the NFC champions. Now, for instance, in Super Bowl, what is that number, 32 back in 1998, the Denver Broncos were the 11-point underdog, and they won outright. But Donnie is right. We have not seen a spread greater than 5 since the Super Bowl that was played in 2009. Super Bowl 43 between the Steelers and the Cardinals. The Steelers a full touchdown favorite. The Cardinals ended up covering, only losing by 4. That shows you how tight the margins are and how razor thin the edges are here. So it might sound silly for us to be like, guys, the money line on Monday was -112, and you're making it a big update that it's -130. That is the movement that matters now, at least in the last 10, 15 years in Super Bowl history. And when Donnie and I were here last week, looking forward to Conference Championship weekend, we did a segment on the potential projected Super Bowl 58 odds for the NFL's Final Four. In this Super Bowl 54 rematch, played out 5 years later, the Niners were a 3-point favorite in that hypothetical matchup against the Chiefs, the over-under 47.5. When this real matchup became available on Sunday night, line opened at 2.5 in favor of the 49ers, quickly got bet back down to 1.5, and that's where we stand. -1.5 to back San Francisco. If you want to lay the 1.5 with the 49ers, it's -115 in terms of that juice. So, Donnie, put on your odds maker's cap. Go to that risk room in Las Vegas where we will be in just about 48 to 72 hours. When we kick off for Super Bowl Sunday in 10 days in Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, what will the closing number be?
Look, we can remove 2 equations right off the bat, that the Kansas City Chiefs will close as a favorite. That's going to be thrown out the window. Or the San Francisco 49ers will be favored by 3 points or more. That's not going to happen. The consensus line right now, if you look across the board, is 2. FanDuel's still holding that -1.5. And you say, well, why would that be? Why don't they just move it to 2? Well, obviously, as we know as sportsbook operators, you got to balance your own books in that time frame, depending on who's betting what and where. Now, when this game winds up, I do think we end at an even 2 points in this game. Is it a big difference between 2.5 and 1.5? Not necessarily here, but I do think sometimes when we're taking a look at these Super Bowls, and again, there's a lot more movement, Ben, you can make, right? If you take a look at let's just say the line was 8.5 points. You could see that shift down to a 7.5 or shift that up to a 9.5, a full point swing, even up to the final moments of the game, like a Friday, Saturday, right to Sunday. I don't get those vibes here. The only thing that could change this marketplace drastically is if you see next week, which again is a probability. Players get hurt in practice, Ben. We've seen it before. Hey, Christian McCaffrey tweaked his hamstring on a Thursday afternoon practice before the Sunday Super Bowl. That's the only thing that's going to change my mind on something drastic by moving more than 1 point. But if we're sitting at the FanDuel Sportsbook, I would be shocked if this game finishes higher than a -2.5 point spread for San Francisco. I think 2 is that number we're going to finally land on when it's all said and done.
Completely agree. It's -115 in terms of the juice right now. More heavily skewed to backing San Francisco on the 1.5 spread than it is for Kansas City. Quickly here, Donnie, I do want to ask you this because I think it's a fascinating conversation given how razor thin the margins are at this moment. It's -105 to back the Chiefs with the 1.5 on the spread. It's plus 110 money line for Kansas City right now. Where do you think the gap is? When is the right time to dive in? Would it make more sense to get a point, knowing that the Super Bowl finishing with a 1-point margin is probably unlikely, but still, is it better to get the full point with Kansas City and lose 15 cents in terms of profitability than to take the Chiefs outright on that plus 110 money line number?
It's all relative. You're betting $1 million on the game, right? Where you want the plus 110, where that plus 110 would mean a lot there. Or you're betting 25-50 just to have some fun. If that's the case, I'm taking the 1.5. Because you've seen this play out so many times in your life where you say, like, 1.5. All they got to do is basically win the football game, and then you find out that one team is up 2 points here late in the game, hoping to kick a field goal. Like, let's just say, San Francisco is down 1 point, or down 2 points. They're driving. Okay, here comes the field goal. Oh, no, if they make it, I'm going to lose my money. But if you took the 1.5, hey, make this field goal. Like, I love this. 1 point game here, fantastic. I cover, as opposed to saying, I only risked it for plus 110 here for a straight-up win by the Kansas City Chiefs. It might not come into play at all. But that number, unless you're betting numbers, are $500,000, $1 million, just take the plus 1.5. It's half juice at minus 105 anyway, and live with that there.
Yeah, depending on what your unit size is, that's really where things can go. Oh, and by the way, this is Super Bowl 58. Only once in the history of the previous 57 Super Bowls, that was Super Bowl 25, has the game been decided by a single point. The New York Giants edged out the Buffalo Bills 20-19 back on January 27th, 1991. Right now, 70% of the handle as it pertains to, or 70% of the bets rather, as it pertains to spread betting backing Kansas City. 77% of the money for the spread backing KC as well. The public is in on the Chiefs. Again, the money line right now is minus 130 in favor of the 49ers. If it gets to 2, as Donnie estimated, I would guess it's probably a minus 142, minus 158 number on the 49ers on that money line. Donnie, what about the total? 47.5 at this moment. It has remained steady. The under a tad bit more juice than if you wanted to back the over of 47.5. Where do you believe the total ends come Super Bowl Sunday?
That's a real key line, that 47.5. That's why it's posted there and hasn't moved. Bettors like, hey, make sure you get the 47s or less across the board. That's always been a tale as old as time. So I don't know if that number is going to go higher or lower. And also, how crazy is this when we start talking about things like, okay, the total. You're telling me San Francisco and Kansas City are going to play in a dome for a Super Bowl with 2 weeks to prepare and be completely healthy. Where do I sign up for the over? That's just not the way the Kansas City Chiefs play anymore. A very good scoring defense for Kansas City and an offense that's willing to put in 10, 11, or 12 play drives. One quick point here on the side, too, because it looks like it's a heavily public betting game here for Kansas City right off the break. 3 out of every 4 tickets coming in. But keep in mind, if you're just looking again at the FanDuel Sportsbook, that number opened up at minus 2.5 and now sits at 1.5. So that public number is pushing that number down lower. So it's still correct. So if the line was going reverse, then we'd have some trouble, but it's not yet.
Plenty of Super Bowl conversation in hour 2. We end hour 1 next.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev. Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
favorite. I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
I can tell you, like, Las Vegas is heavy San Francisco territory. All right, there are a ton of Niner fans, man, in Las Vegas and in Nevada, and specifically Reno. Reno's close, obviously, right? So, like, Reno's numbers will be a little bit different, but the total of 47.5. I get it.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
I kind of thought that Mike would maybe go in a different direction, or at least listen to some people with some different ideas.
If you were going to retain Mike Tomlin as coach, and I believe with both feet that you shouldn't let him really anywhere near this hire. That he had proved over the years that this was not an area of comfort or expertise for him.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Purdue on the road in a very difficult place to win in Piscataway, New Jersey. Not in Jersey Mike's Arena, but in the RAC. It was tight.
You still have to win these games. Like, you can talk about even equate it to the NBA. Like OKC just rolling into Detroit, going, yeah, this is going to be an easy victory, and not coming away with the W because you're not focused here. Good move there for the Purdue Boilermakers. You can take a look at Zach Edey.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
One that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Ending out this opening hour of a Thursday live right here on the early line on SportsGrid. I am Ben. He is Donnie. So, DRS, as we have said, there's just one final football game left in the 2023 NFL campaign. There are only two teams, of course, left standing in Super Bowl LVIII, KC and San Francisco. Other teams are already focused on what is next, what is coming in the future for 2024. In 2023, in the offseason that was one of optimism for the New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers coming into town. Could they win their first Lombardi trophy since the guarantee from Joe Namath back in Super Bowl III? Everybody had sky-high expectations for the New York Jets, only to see it come crumbling down on the fourth offensive play of the year when Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles. And then there was a think piece from the Athletics' Diana Rossini, and only the Athletics, by the way, about the dysfunction this season in 2023 for Gang Green. This is a bleeping mess, was the headline for what happened this year in this Jets franchise. Nathaniel Hackett really not being the creative play caller they expected, more so just Aaron Rodgers' frat buddy. Robert Saleh being a little bit preoccupied by what was happening and a little bit paranoid with Aaron Rodgers. And as we all came to know, Aaron Rodgers pulling the strings. Donnie, to me, it wasn't all that surprising, this report. What did you think?
No, it's not surprising at all, and it will continue into next year. When you have a quarterback that controls your entire franchise and gets what he wants and then gets injured, that's what happens here. Not bring in players for the good of the football team, but bring in players for the good and make your quarterback happy. Randall Cobb stunk this year. Allen Lazard stunk this year. Nathaniel Hackett's a terrible offensive coordinator. And I love the fact that people say, well, Hackett runs Aaron Rodgers' offense. What is that? That means he has no appeal anywhere else in the NFL outside of maybe the best quarterback of all time is the only guy that can run his offense. I'm not expecting big things out of the Jets next year. I can't wait to watch it play out.
We will talk about next year in hour number 2 that starts in less than a minute.